She blocked my driveway with her white SUV and stood there smiling when I asked her to move. Then she dialed her phone, pointed at me, and yelled, "He's trespassing. Arrest him." I was holding my keys, my daughter in my arms, and the deed in my pocket, but I said nothing. The fake siren sound from her phone app made my daughter cry, and that's when the neighbors came out. Karen waved a clipboard like it was a badge and slapped a bright orange notice on my door saying I had 24 hours to leave. She said the HOA owned the road, the driveway, and basically everything you see. I stayed calm, because calm scares bullies more than shouting. She leaned close and whispered, "People like you don't get to argue? Here." I looked at her SUV blocking my land and thought about the long nights. I worked to inherit this old house from my father. I kissed my daughter's head, stepped back, and said one line that made her laugh. "You might want to move your car." She laughed louder and crossed her arms. "Make me." I pulled my phone out slowly, not to call anyone, just to check the time. Karen thought I was scared. She started talking louder so everyone could hear. She said I forged papers, that this house was abandoned, that the HOA gave her special control of the street. One neighbor nodded, another recorded, and a third whispered, "She does this to everyone." Karen snapped her fingers at me and said, "Last warning. Move your stuff or I'll have your car towed. Next." I looked at my old pickup parked behind her SUV and smiled a little. That smile made her angry. She walked to my truck and stuck another notice on it, saying it was an illegal vehicle. Then she did something worse. She pointed at my daughter and said, "Kids aren't even allowed here without approval." That line hit me hard, but I still stayed quiet. I stepped aside, opened my gate, and let Karen feel like she won. She told the crowd, "See? They always back down." What she didn't know was the tow. Truck was already on its way, and it wasn't for me. The tow truck came faster than anyone expected. Karen clapped when she heard it, like she had already won. She waved the driver over and pointed at my pickup, shouting rules and codes that didn't exist. The driver didn't move. He looked at his tablet, then at the driveway, then at Karen's SUV blocking it. Karen's smile froze. "Not that one," she snapped. "The old truck?" The driver calmly said, "Ma'am, I was called for the vehicle blocking a private driveway." She laughed and said, "That driveway belongs to the HOA." I finally spoke. "It doesn't." Karen rolled her eyes and said, "Prove it." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded deed. Old and worn, my father's name still printed on it. The driver leaned closer, took a photo, and nodded. Karen stepped back and said, "This is fake. I'll call real police." She dialed again, pacing now, voice shaking but loud. "Yes, officer, I need backup. He's refusing HOA orders. The tow truck." Chains dropped to the ground with a heavy sound. Karen turned around just in time to see them slide under her SUV. She screamed, "You can't touch my car!" I looked her straight in the eyes and said quietly, "You shouldn't have touched my land." Karen ran toward the tow truck like she could stop it with her hands. She stood in front of her SUV and yelled, "I'm calling my lawyer." The driver didn't argue. He just waited. Then 2 police cars turned the corner. Karen's face lit up again. She waved both arms and shouted, "Over here!" She told them I was harassing her, that I threatened her, that I was an illegal occupant. One officer looked at me, then at the driveway, then at the deed still in my hand. The other officer asked Karen for her HOA papers. She handed him a stack of printed rules with no signatures. He flipped through them slowly. Karen kept talking, digging herself deeper with every word. "He's lying." He broke in. "He's dangerous." My daughter squeezed my shoulder. The officer finally asked me one question. "Sir, do you own this property?" I nodded and said, "Yes, I inherited it." He checked the address on his system and paused. His tone changed. "Inherited from John Miller?" I said, "That was my father." The officer looked at me again, sharper now, almost careful. Karen laughed nervously and said, "Why does that matter?" The officer answered without looking at her, "Because this property isn't under any HOA." The crowd went quiet. Karen whispered, "That's not possible." I took a breath and said the line that made the officers exchange looks. "It's not just my house. It's my county." Karen stared at me like I had told a bad joke. What does that even mean? She asked, her voice cracking. One officer stepped closer to me and lowered his voice. Sir, should we call this in? I nodded once. Karen noticed the change and started backing away. This is harassment, she said, louder now, trying to pull control back. You can't tow my car. I know people. The tow truck driver quietly finished locking the chains. I pulled my wallet out and opened it just enough for the badge to catch the light. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I didn't want to say it in front of my kid, I said. But I'm the elected sheriff of this county. One officer straightened up fast. The other took a step away from Karen. Her mouth opened, then closed. No, that's not funny, she whispered. I looked at her clipboard, then at the fake notices on my door. Impersonating authority, filing false reports, blocking access to private property, I said calmly, like I was reading a grocery list. Karen started shaking her head. This isn't over, she said. That's when the officer said, Ma'am, turn around. The tow truck engine roared. Her SUV lifted off the ground. Karen screamed my name like she knew me, but she never did. The handcuffs clicked and the sound felt louder than her screaming. Karen tried one last time, crying now, saying this was a mistake, saying the HOA would destroy me. No one listened. Neighbors who once avoided her stepped closer, phones up, faces shocked. One woman whispered, She towed my son's car last year. Another said, She fined my husband for parking, the officer read. Karen her rights while she stared at the ground, her clipboard lying in the dirt like it never mattered. I picked up the fake notice from my door and folded it once, slowly. The tow truck pulled away with her SUV, and for the first time, the driveway was clear. My daughter let out a small laugh and said, Daddy, the bad lady is gone. I knelt down and hugged her tight. An officer asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at the house, the land my father protected, the flag on the porch moving in the wind. Yes, I said, and make it public. Because power only works in the dark. And today, the light finally hit her. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Videos, comments, people cheering and arguing at the same time. Karen's name showed up with charges under it. And the HOA went silent like it never existed. I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun hit the driveway she tried to steal. An officer stopped by, not in a rush, just to say the land records were locked now, protected. He saluted me before leaving, not because of my badge, but because of my father's name on that deed. My daughter ran her bike up and down the driveway, free, laughing, safe. I thought about how close I came to yelling that day, and how silence did more damage than anger ever could. I didn't fight for control. I fought for what was already mine. And as the flag moved in the quiet air, one thought stayed with me. In this country, power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from truth. That evening, I sat on the old steps my father built with his own hands. The house felt lighter, like it could breathe again. Neighbors I had never met before walked over, not to ask questions, just to say sorry for staying quiet. One man shook my hand and said, She scared all of us. I told him fear only works when good people look away. My daughter leaned against me and asked if bad people always lose. I paused, then said, Only when someone finally stands still. The road was quiet, the driveway empty, the land untouched. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like a son who kept a promise. My phone buzzed one last time with a message from the county office. Case closed. Charges filed. HOA dissolved. I looked at the house, the land, the sky above it, and whispered something my father used to say. This land doesn't belong to power. Power belongs to the people who protect it. I didn't expect one more knock that night, but it came. A quiet one. I opened the door and saw a man in a suit holding a thin folder. Not scared, not angry. He said Karen's name and paused. She wasn't acting alone. He slid the papers toward me. Inside were signatures, payments, and 3 HOA board members who let her run wild while they stayed clean. I closed the folder slowly and handed it back. They won't stay clean, I said. He nodded once and walked away. I looked down the driveway, empty and calm, and realized something important. Karen thought she was the power, but she was just noise. Real power stays quiet, waits, and strikes once. I locked the door, turned off the light, and slept easy. Because some fights don't end loud, they end right. The next day, county vehicles lined the street before sunrise. Not lights, just presence. People watched, from windows as investigators. Walked into 3 houses at the end of the block. No shouting, no drama. By noon, 2 HOA board members were in the back of cars. Faces covered, reputations gone. The third tried to run his mouth online, blaming everyone else. That post lasted 6 minutes before the evidence replies buried it. I never showed up. I didn't need to. My phone buzzed once with a short message. They confessed. I looked at my daughter drawing on the porch with chalk, using the driveway as her canvas. That driveway Karen said I couldn't use. I realized something then. The twist wasn't that I was the sheriff. The real twist was this: I never had to act like one. The system worked because someone finally stood on the truth and didn't move. And the street that once feared one loud woman, it learned a quiet lesson it would never forget. That night, as I locked the gate and walked back to the porch, my daughter tugged my hand. Daddy, will she ever come back? I looked down the empty street. The house is calm, the wind whispering through the trees. I knelt beside her and said softly, "Not if we remember who we are and what we own." She nodded, a small smile on her face. I realized the final twist wasn't just Karen's downfall. It was the neighborhood waking up, seeing that power belongs to those who respect law, family, and truth. The house stood taller somehow, shadows softer, the driveway finally ours. And in that quiet victory, I felt the real weight of inheritance, not just land, but courage, patience, and the proof that even the loudest threats fade when you hold steady. That morning, I found a small envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a note scribbled in shaky handwriting. I underestimated you. Never again. No signature. No apology, just fear. I held it up to the sunlight and felt the last piece of tension lift. Karen had tried to control, intimidate, and rewrite reality, but the truth had its own power. I looked out over the driveway, the house, the flag waving gently, and smiled. My daughter ran past me laughing, chalk in hand, leaving colorful lines across the pavement. For the first time in years, this land felt alive again, not because of what I inherited, but because we had claimed it. And somewhere deep inside, I knew no fake authority, no loud threats, no false papers could ever take that away. The fight was over, and justice, quiet, relentless, and real, had won. End the story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing HOA stories.